Hi, I'm Andrea Goyen. I know many of you because I've been talking to you for a while now. Happy March. I'm the Environmental Literacy and Sustainability Coordinator at the San Mateo County Office of Education, and I'm super excited to welcome our first guest speaker, Brooke Teller from Portland Public Schools. As Sharon mentioned, the Portland Public Schools case study is online, so if someone can put that in the chat box, that'd be great for people to just have access to it. But let me share a little bit about Brooke before she jumps in here. So after 20 years in a high school science classroom, Brooke transitioned to a teacher leader role as the Portland Public Schools STEM coordinator, where she continues to bring her curiosity of passion and passion for science to that role. In this space, she's working collaboratively with elementary school teachers. She's leading the development of a comprehensive NGSS aligned and literacy embedded elementary science curriculum. And now COVID-19, of course, has brought many opportunities, and Brooke became the district's outdoor learning coordinator through this time. So with that same curiosity and passion, she's leading the way for teachers and students to also do all this science and everything and also get outside. So Brooke, I want to turn it over to you. We're so excited to have you here sharing a bit more about the journey.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate having the opportunity to come back and update this working group on what we've been up to in Portland, especially since the snow started to fall. It's always a big question about what do we do in Maine in the winter around outdoor learning. So I'll go back and start at the beginning a little bit to catch folks up that weren't in our last session that we did here, and then let folks know where we are now and where we're headed. So this work really began last spring. Of course, we're coming up to that date when we all went indoors and away from school to remote learning because of COVID-19. And during that time, we had a group of parents and community advocates that were already starting to talk about what can we do to get our students outside so that we can come back and be in person, because we knew that and know that relationships are really important to the learning process. And when we have to do that over a screen, it's really hard. And so these parents and community advocates were really the catalyst for this work. And so they met during the spring and summer, and I was able to start meeting with them in the summer after some work that I had been doing with the district on how were we going to reopen our schools in the fall. And the district began to think about what that would look like. We have a hybrid model in Portland, so students are in school 2 days a week and home 2 days a week, with Wednesdays being a catch-up remote day for everyone. And teachers and students and families would feel safer if some or more than some of that time could be spent outdoors. And so the district realized that this was going to be a large initiative that they wanted to see through, and asked if I would transition my role from STEM coordinator to that of outdoor learning coordinator to start the school year. And so that is what we did. And so for the start of school, it was our task to get 156 outdoor learning spaces up and running at our 17 different buildings. And that included things like stumps and bucket seats. You can see the easels and whiteboards with newsprint. I'm holding a student learning kit, which would be a drawstring backpack and clipboard. So materials that students didn't have to share, seating for the outdoor spaces, and materials for the teachers to be able to transition their classes outside. And it truly was, how do you do what you do inside, outside? It wasn't learning how to use the outdoors to provide curriculum. It was just, what is a safe way to be with our students? We did create some professional development in general that went out to all teachers. And I know Erica is on this call, and she is featured in that. So shout out to Erica. And trying to help teachers see how they could do this work with their students. A big chunk of our initiative was funded by CARES money. And that also included the purchase of some shade structures that we could set up at our campuses. So in the lower picture, the very groovy looking gray wing is one of those shade structures, of which we have 2 at each of our buildings. But you can see here that not all of the outdoor spaces had those. And so it could be as simple as stumps under a beautiful tree with its autumn leaves. the picture of the children, their school got a grant, and so each child had their own bucket so they could carry their materials and have their seat at the same time. And one creative teacher created an outdoor hot beverage station, and so brought a basket of mugs out and tea and hot cocoa and things like that. So we all know how creative teachers can be, and of course end up personalizing their spaces. So winter comes pretty quickly after the start of the school year in Maine. The shade structures have to come down. They can't withstand any kind of snow load. And so that protection or delineation of an outdoor space did not exist anymore, but I would say the stage had been set for students knowing what it was like to go outside and do work outside. We had one school, they were able to get snowshoes and do snowshoeing. The boy in the lower left corner with the orange hat is in his sit spot doing some writing work. Katie's also on this call. Her students are with her around a poster of animal tracks that they were looking for. And so just some examples of, even though it's winter, our students are able to get outside. A reason they're able to get outside is we were also able to purchase winter hats, gloves, and snow pants to be able to provide that type of outdoor gear to students that may not have had access to it. Because one of the most important things is to be looking through an equity lens and not wanting anyone to miss out on the opportunity because they don't have what they need. We have started to provide more professional development to teachers at this time in order to help support them in actually building out curriculum that uses the outdoors. So really starting to shift from that emergency crisis mode into a mode that's going to help teachers develop things that we will use beyond COVID times. And so that was really important to me at the start of the year, was that our district was going to, if they were going to go ahead and do this and really go after having outdoor learning, that it wasn't a 1 year only or however long the pandemic lasts initiative, that we were going to look at ways that we could spend more time outdoors for all of the great reasons that the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative has on their websites. Just to share an anecdote, I'm working with a senior in high school who is doing a project on nature deficit disorder, and just shared some of the resources from the website around health and well-being. And he's super excited to be able to use that in the project that he's working on. So even our students are really engaged in how we can do this more. I think some of the next moves beyond professional development for the teachers are also to actually take a look back and think about trauma in a more intentional way than we did around the crisis of just getting outdoors. I have heard from teachers, for some classes, it has taken many months to get the students to feel comfortable going outside, and that acknowledging trauma from being asylum seekers or refugees to our city is real, and we need to do a better job at acknowledging and then working with teachers to build capacity around that so that they can help their students. So for me, that's a priority next move for building comfort for teachers and students in the outdoor spaces. Some of the things that we've learned over the course of the year, teachers can be really creative, like the hot beverage station, but also around pop-up learning opportunities that can happen. The students in the top picture are at one of our elementary schools, and a teacher had relayed to me one morning they came out and the buckets were wet. There was condensation on the buckets. And so that led to an immediate pop-up conversation about science lesson about what's condensation and how did that happen. Having teachers feeling comfortable in the space to then actually use those pop-up learning opportunities has been really great. Pop-up classrooms, Katie, who's on the call, would tell me, like, maybe it's raining and they can't go to their wooded space, but they could go under the front door awning to the building and just be outside there on the concrete, protected, but still outside. Starting to look more and more at using the opportunities that were outside to look at puzzling phenomena. As the district STEM coordinator who's really interested in working on an elementary science curriculum, puzzling phenomena are at the heart of that work. And so students are so curious when they're outside, and they're going to bring up the topics that they're interested while they're sitting out there, whether it be the worm crawling on the ground and picking that up. And we have some video of some of our garden classes where students had never held a worm before. Thinking about those small moments that are actually really great learning experiences for our students. I have learned to lean on my in-house experts. I have mentioned Katie multiple times, and she is one of my in-house experts on outdoor learning and experiential learning. And so making sure that you lift up those voices in your settings is really important. We would not have been as successful if we did not have an outdoor learning building liaison, a stipended position in each of the 17 buildings, so that I have a person that I can contact that then can relay information to their staff. And so that has been really instrumental in this work being done. And it is my hope that that is a position that can continue in the future. Some not so positive lessons: vandalism happens. The lower picture shows some kids climbing on the shade structures. Clearly that's a safety risk, but that same shade structure also ended up getting sliced, the rope cut and the shade sliced. So some of that happens, and thinking about being more intentional about student buy-in for the equipment and materials that belong to a school. If we had done some better teaching around that in the beginning, there might have been less climbing on the structures and less vandalism. Definitely recognizing that we need more professional development as we've moved away again from the crisis response and more into the like, I like this, how can I do this better with my students? Looking at how are we going to align that to our visions. So if equity is the big umbrella, how are these experiences equitable for our students, and how do we make sure they continue to have them? And then I spoke more deeply about the trauma scenario. So I think to folks that are looking at doing this or in the process of doing it is a process, and flexibility is really important. You probably already have some learning spaces that exist on your campus. You can see the school garden with the raised beds. A lot of our schools had those and had garden experiences prior to COVID-19. And so those were experts and areas that we could leverage when we were working on this. I would say that your communities and your PTOs, PTAs, they want to be a part of this. So these groovy red sit spots were donated to this particular school. So let folks help where they can. We were able to set up an opportunity to donate through our foundation for Portland Public Schools. So we did raise over $5,000 from community donations, which was really exciting. I would say that, this is shown, I talk a lot about elementary because that's the group I've been working with for science, but the largest picture here is of one of our high schools and their students outside. And I think they have 14 spaces so that all of their ninth grade advisories, 14 of them, are outside twice a week. And currently our 10th through 12th grade students aren't back as often, but they also use their spaces when they're in school. So our high schools are accessing these spaces as well. But you can see the laptop on one of the stumps. That Wi-Fi access has been a barrier. I don't necessarily see that as a problem because I don't necessarily want folks that connected to technology when they're in the outdoor spaces, but I do understand where that would actually be really helpful. So these are things we're looking at as we move forward and thinking about what outdoor learning looks like for us. So that kind of covers where we've been, and I do want to give folks time to ask some questions. So I will stop sharing my screen. And
awesome. Well, Brooke, thank you so much. That was super inspiring. It was really great to see how how your district has taken the systemic approach to it, how many students are getting access to it, and then of course the pictures are just incredible to have. I'll start off with just one of the questions I heard or saw come through the chat box, which was when you transitioned inside, were there heightened concerns by teachers about COVID and being inside, and have your schools seen COVID cases increase after going inside?
That's a great question. So it's important to understand that we did not use the outdoors to increase the number of students that we could have at our schools. So at any given time, it could be pouring rain And the number of students that were at our building, outside or inside, was the amount that we could have inside of the building with social distancing and all of the different guidelines in place. So I don't think it caused concern because it wasn't like all of a sudden we were trying to put a lot more people in the building, and it has not shown increases in cases. I mean, of course, we've had cases at all or most of our schools. Once in a while, a school will have to shut for a few days, but it has been very few and far that we've had large closures because of COVID.
Great, that's super helpful. And then another question coming through about around issues of security, and we've heard that come up in the past, but how did you address issues of security?
It's a good question. It did come up a lot. And in thinking about our students, especially at the elementary level, going outside for recess, it was already a process that was in place. And so thinking about how is it different or not different from going out for recess? We have walkie-talkies available. Teachers would, let the office know that they were going outside. I think it's a hard question, right? Because we're an urban setting too. So some of our schools are and their potential outdoor learning sites interact with the public more than others. And so it was with the same considerations if you were going to go walk on a field trip so buildings, I think, took that on more than we had like a district guideline, and I could get people more information on that if that's needed.
Great, that's helpful. And then how have you dealt with issues like the restrooms and the meals and those types of like health issues?
Yep. So with the students needing to use the restrooms, many times teachers have another adult with them when their class is outside, so they're able to walk the students in and out. Clearly, having the students use the restroom before they go outside, but we know that it doesn't matter sometimes with little kids. As much as you have them use the restroom, they're still going to have to use the restroom. For some, I've heard that they'll walkie-talkie to the building and the hall monitor will go to the door and the kid will run from the site of the one teacher to the site of the other teacher. So making sure that they're supervised during that transition. Snacks, things like morning meetings and snacks and lunches, especially when it was warmer, students were outside for those periods of time. Now, not as much. So more eating in school. We have plexiglass dividers between students at their desk tables and things like that.
Kind of going back to the last comment you made, and then also this one, just a quick follow up. Do you have like a teacher checklist, or is there like some sort of staff checklist for that to keep track of all these things, like carrying an EpiPen, a radio, cell phone, walkie-talkie? How are you guys dealing with that?
Yeah, so within the buildings, it's much like when a teacher takes students out on their field trip. So knowing what they would have, most of our teachers are not bringing first aid kits out, just like they don't bring a first aid kit out to the playground. So there would be an adult that would walk the student back into the nurse, so that EpiPens would be the same as a student that carries an EpiPen. They typically have it on their person during school. So I think that had really been left to like how the buildings were going to handle that versus coming under what I was sharing with them.
Okay, and then I'm going to try to get a couple more in here. I'll try to merge a few of them together. So there was a couple of questions around the like, how did this conversation get seriously started with the taking instruction outside, in particular with the teachers? So is it optional for them to go outside? Is it something that they're like, we really heavily encouraged to do? And then along with that is how did professional development go? Or like, could we hear a little bit more about the professional development that was put into place for the teachers?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, it is not mandatory for teachers to take their students outside. Based on the teacher union and things like, it is not in our contract as teachers that we must teach students outside. But instructional leaders, administrators in the buildings, I think were pretty clear that the expectation was that we can do morning meetings outside, we can have our snacks outside, we can have lunch outside. And you know what? You probably could bring the read aloud outside, so showing teachers how that could happen. As a district, our goal and hope was 50% or more of a student's time in person would be outdoors. And so that was our hope, but again, not a mandate. In terms of professional development, we just tried to make sure that the teachers had all of the resources they might possibly need. And then we created a professional development video, sort of an outdoor learning 101, that talked about things from not going out the same door that you go out for recess, so that you're not triggering the, oh, we're going to go have playtime, but we're actually going to go have work, or carrying your clipboard, because that means we're going to go out and do work versus play. And things like, when a moth lands on your leg, you don't need to freak out. You can just gently brush it away or just observe it. Like those types of things for helping teachers think about outdoor classroom management versus indoor classroom management.
Great, that's super helpful. And I did just put in the chat box, I put a resource that we developed that complements what Brooke is talking about like those initial, just helping people wrap their heads around, like, these are the things that you could do outside. And then, hey, once you get comfortable, here's a few more things you could try. So along those lines, I think some people are interested in learning a little bit more about that stipended position for the outdoor learning liaison. Could you explain a little more about that?
Yeah, sure. So in order for us to have someone in the building that could handle their building's outdoor classroom sign up, or what materials do teachers need that they don't have, how many pairs of snow pants does one school need, that position would handle those types of responsibilities and then report back to me. The position was $1,500 it was the stipend for each of those folks. And so with the exception of one school, it is a teacher in the building. One school, it's a parent that has stepped up to do that role. And that has been instrumental in me being able to help them facilitate how their building uses those spaces. Great. Because they know best their staff. That, you know, some have designated this is the second grade outdoor classroom, or all the classrooms are up for grabs and you sign them out. They've done different things in different buildings.
Awesome. And then I'll ask just one last question, because you've been so amazing at answering these questions. It's kind of a combination of two things. Are you analyzing the results of outdoor learning as compared with previous styles of teaching? And so that's like its own thing, but also kind of associated with this, does the Maine state government or members of Congress have an understanding of what's going on here? That might connect to this evaluation concept.
So I'll take the second first. Yes, I think the Maine State Department of Education is looking at outdoor learning as an initiative. No, we are not looking currently at what sort of successes educationally students have had, because our goal was to get teachers outside, not to like teach with the outside or really work beyond that. So those would be in my perfect world next moves as we start to work with teachers on using the outdoors within their curriculum.
Great. That's fantastic. And just so you know, once we're done here, go through the chat box. There's like lots of happiness and thank yous, and also a few requests for resources. But thank you so much. Let's all give Brooke a big round of applause or some little emojis. That was absolutely fantastic. So thank you for that.